Well, I'm Bob Berry Jr., and I'm the son of the legend, Big Bob Berry, and have I worked with him for a long time at Channel 4. I started in 1982, and I've been there ever since. And so Dad and I spent 26 years together working before he retired in 2008. So had a great time. Grew up at that television station, and went as a young kid with Dad when he was working at KFOR Radio with Jack Ogle and all of them back in the day in Norman. Went with Dad to games to keep statistics and hang out and things like that, because didn't exactly split the atom in the classroom. Wasn't really interested in academics, and I quickly found out that's kind of how Dad's career went as an academician as well. So he didn't really, he told me to do good in school, but he said if I didn't, he understood, because he didn't do any good in school. So we kind of hit it off right then when I was a little kid, just hanging out with him at sporting events. So, being with my father when he did games was really fun. And back then he had such a hectic schedule. He did Norman High School games usually on Friday nights, and then did Oklahoma football and basketball on the weekends, and then, did radio all the time Monday through Friday. He would be gone at 6 in the morning, wouldn't be back until after the 10 o'clock show at Channel 4, so I never saw the guy growing up. But we talked a lot on the phone, and that was kind of fun. But he got his play-by-play break when he did Norman High School football, because he was doing games for Bud Wilkinson's sons. Jay and Pat both played at Norman High while Bud was coaching at OU. Jay, most notably, that I know about, because Jay talks about my dad all the time. But that's how, when it came time to replace whoever was doing it, I think the guy's name was Bill Bryan, maybe, that my dad replaced as the voice of Oklahoma football. There was an open audition put on by the university, and they invited 15 or 20 of them to come to a game, or maybe the varsity alumni game. That might have been it, that spring scrimmage, and sat them all in a bunch of booths down the line in the press box and had them do their games in a reel-to-reel tape situation and listen to them. And supposedly Bud Wilkinson was instrumental in making the decision to hire my father, because he'd heard him. He was already familiar with him, having listened to Norman High School broadcasts on KNOR, wanting to hear how his son Jay played. So, and Dad, to his dying day, said that was one of the biggest thrills he had in the business, was the fact that he was selected to do Oklahoma football by the one and only Bud Wilkinson. It was really a great memory. So that's kind of was Dad's passion, obviously, was play-by-play on the radio. But he was really good at doing the afternoon sportscast, and I used to go out to KNOR and hang out with him when he did that. He would let me clear the wire, back in the days of the wire machines, and go clear the wire and use the ruler that he had to the day he retired, for the metal rulers that I still use to this day. They're probably the same ones we've had for 50 or 60 years, to tear the wire copy and hang it on the hooks at KNOR Radio. So that was my job, back by the wire machines, and help change the ink and all of that. That was really fun. And but when I remember how excited he was in 1966 when he was offered the weekend job by Lee Allen Smith to come up to Channel 4 and do weekends. And Mike Treps was the sports director at the time. So, it was Dad had done a little television and very little. Back in the day, they had, I don't even know what the initials stood for, but he would do occasionally a TVS Big 8 basketball game of the week. They would call him and say, hey, we know you do Oklahoma on the radio. Could you do a TVS game of the week this week in addition to your radio duties, or maybe in place of, or whatever? And they mailed him a TVS patch, a fancy TVS patch that my mom had to sew on his sport coat. And he would do those kind of games in a live event situation. He really liked that. And so I just remember how excited he was, and I was 10 years old when he got hired at Channel 4 for the first time, and really excited about his TV duties. And then he was up there, 3.5 years, and 1970 became the sports director, and was that until 1996, when he basically told me to take over. He would always say stuff later on, which a lot of you can relate to. I'm getting out of here at just the right time. You can have this stuff, and I'm going on, because he was at such a glorious time in television. I always used to just sit there and want him to tell me stories, and he'd tell me about the time Mr. Gaylord said, yeah, you can go to the Olympics, in Munich. Go all you want. Take, how many people you think you need, Bob? And Dad would, rip off the names, Daryl Barton, Bob Dotson, whoever, and they'd take a crew of 4, 5, 6 people and go to the Munich Olympics in 1972, and we know what happened there. That's how I woke up. I woke up one morning, had my radio alarm set for school. I was 15, 16 years old, and I woke up to either Mutual Radio or somebody, I assume it was WKY Radio, and I heard my dad's voice talking about the Israeli situation that was going on, the hostages that were taken at the Olympics in '72, because Dad, as it turns out, and those guys had been in some house down the way from the Olympic Village, and they heard the helicopters flying over, and as he later told it, they curiously went outside and tried to find out what was going on, even though they couldn't speak German and what have you. And then next thing you know, he was stringing for Mutual Radio, doing reports on the latest and updating this hostage situation at the Olympics, which of course turned out to be just dreadful, with all those Israeli athletes losing their lives. But I woke up to that one morning. I could not process that, and went downstairs and talked to my mom. And she hadn't heard from him. This was back when, if you made a phone call to Germany, I mean, you had to wait 30 seconds for his response, and then wait about another 30 seconds before you could talk back. It was like calling another planet. And so she really wasn't aware of what he was doing, and I tried to explain to her what I had heard. It was a crazy situation. But the point being, he went to the Olympics, hung out for 2 weeks. He went to the '76 Olympics with another big crew, and when I was going through his belongings recently, when he passed away in 2011, I went through a drawer and I found a check stub for $2,500. And it was the draw that Dad got out for a crew of 6 to go to the Montreal Summer Olympics in 1976. $2,500 for a crew of 6 for at least a week or maybe longer. I thought, wow, how times have changed. But I was glad to have come across that stub. So he really enjoyed those trips. He went to the Super Bowl one year. Mr. Gaylord said, go to the Super Bowl. I don't even know if there were any Oklahomans involved or not. It didn't matter. They could just kind of go where they wanted. They were WKY-TV. And I remember Bob Dotson, I think, went on that trip with my father and helped with his eloquent writing style, and they came back and did a 30-minute special. And I remember the closing shot was this ring, this brass ring that was dwindling in the wind, the brass ring, the trophy for winning the Super Bowl. And it was the Jets and Baltimore Colts, and Dad was really proud of that show, and I think it won some awards or what have you. So I just remember all those good times, and how he had it, like a bunch of you did, just the best TV station at the best time in the business, when everybody was doing stuff for the first time. So there were really no boundaries. You could kind of go creatively and kind of do whatever you wanted to do. And Dad was a very creative guy and really enjoyed that part of it. And that's why he liked dressing up, after his 10 o'clock show and being on Count Gregor's, midnight theater or whatever. He would play roles there, and then he may have even appeared in a Foreman Scotty or two. I don't know. He just told me he liked doing that stuff because he grew up in drama when he was a junior high and high school student. So he fancied himself to be a thespian. But so Glory Days at Channel 4 continued, and one of his favorite segments ever was football predictions with Linda. And Dad, again, being the drama king that he was in high school, he enjoyed the production of those more than anything. And now Linda, I'm sure, probably told you that she was the dominant force in terms of prognosticating football games. But Dad claims he did all of that. He said, this is what you're going to say, Linda, and this is what I'm going to say. And it was a skit to him. It was a mini production. And he really prided himself on putting together those weekly segments and bringing guests in. Coach Switzer appeared on those segments a bunch of times, and other OU athletes, because Channel 4 taped the Barry Switzer show there, brought to you by Kerr McGee. So a lot of those guys would be hanging around sometimes, and Dad would coerce them into sticking around for football predictions. But he liked that. He, I remember, went to great lengths during the O.J. Simpson trial in 1994 when he got Chopper 4 involved. He said, hey, we have a white Bronco here at Channel 4, and I'll go down a slow speed chase down the Broadway extension, and the Chopper, you can shoot me. And it all had to do with football predictions. And that was the time management, I can't remember who were the managers at the time, but they were starting to roll their eyes for the first time, like, we're going to do all this for this. And I remember supporting Dad, going, you don't know how many people talk about football predictions. They love this. And it was one of his better segments that he ever did in the white Bronco, picking football games. So great times with Linda, and that was a very popular segment. But he just had fun. He was, as a lot of you I hope know, same guy on and off the workplace, off the field, whatever. He was like it at home. He was like it on the golf course. Guy played golf 8 days a week. And he had to come in and tell you every single shot of his round of golf. Not his round of golf, every shot. He would always say, come back here, and he had really good penmanship. He'd say, guess what I had on number 1 today? And he'd draw a nice little 4. Guess what I had on number 2 today? Nice little 3. And and then I had a 2-putt at number 6 for this. And then and it was like an entire length, a counting sheet of his golf round, shot by shot. They'd be going, Bob, you got a format in? You have a rundown done? You have your scripts done? And we'd be in the back room of the old sports office when Robbie and I were there, and Robert Allen, and I'd have to listen to Dad's scorecard rendition. But that was fine because he loved it. He'd play 8 days a week. And I do remember, though, recently, a little personal story, when I went into the current general manager at Channel 4 and I said, it was contract negotiation time, and I said, here's what I want. He said, what? And I said, I'd like the same contract that the sports director had here in the mid-'70s. And the guy just went, oh, okay, yeah, I'm sure we can handle that. I said, are you sure? He said, yeah. He goes, why? Was there something I need to know? And I go, well, how about pretty darn good salary, a country club membership, an unmarked car, completely maintained, and that's what he had. And that was in the mid-'70s. What do you think? And the guy just rolled his eyes, says, there's no way your dad had that kind of a deal. I said, yes, he did. I said, and he earned it too. And the guy said, well, you're not going to get that kind of deal. And that was 30 years later. I always told Dad that. I said, you had the best timing of this whole deal. Timing was impeccable. And he knew it. He knew he was in the glory years of TV. But I grew up with the Ogle boys, Kevin, Kent, and Kelly. And I get asked about them all the time. But I just remember little things about when we were all very young. And I'm older than Kevin probably by a couple years, I think. So probably 3 or 4 years older than Kent and 5 or 6 years older than Kelly. But I do remember going, I think Jack and Ann lived in Midwest City, as I recall, because I remember our parents sending us to the back room one time when they went over to the Ogles to play cards. And I remember having my bones rattled about every 10 seconds by a jet either landing or taking off at Tinker. And I hated loud noises, man. I mean, I covered my ears up all the time for fireworks or whatever. And I remember kind of boo-hooing about the loud noises, and my mom told me to suck it up while they were playing cards and smoking, 3 packs of cigarettes out there playing cards with the Ogles. So I remember that. I remember Kevin used to have a kind of a fetish, if you will, for Superman, and he would wear a towel over his shoulders and have a big old safety pin or whatever you called those back in the day, and he'd have his cape on. And about half the time you'd hear Kevin just jump into the room and he'd say, dun, dun, dun. He'd put his hands on his hips as a young kid and strike the pose of Superman. It was kind of funny. I still give him a hard time about that. He's a pretty big Superman right now at 6'8". But so I remember good times with the Ogles as a kid. And then Kevin and I, when we grew up, went to a high school basketball camp that Jack put on. It was called the Champions Classic or something, I don't know. Camp of Champions at UCO at Central State's what it was called then, and it was a basketball camp, and Kevin and me and another friend of his won the 3-on-3 championship at that camp, and Happy Hairston was the featured attraction of that camp, who at the time played for the LA Lakers with Wilt Chamberlain and Elgin Baylor and some of those guys, Jerry West, and it was cool seeing Happy Hairston. And Kevin and I won the 3-on-3 contest, and they had a big deal at the camp, and you guys have won a big trophy. Congrats on being the 3-on-3. I never got a trophy. I never got it. I remember to this day going to Kevin going, where's that trophy? We were supposed to get a trophy for the 3-on-3 deal. And he giggled about how Jack probably had that somewhere in Burns Flat or Elk City or something out in one of his apartments that he was building. I like that about Jack Ogle, was always his free spirit and how he was always an entrepreneur, trying to find the next big rich thing. So good memories of the Ogle boys. But I do remember my first year at Channel 4, 1982, doing the noon show on April 1st, and George Tomic and the McCain brothers. And I decided to play a little April Fool's joke on the audience. And Ron King, who I'm sure some of you remember, was there hanging out, and I told him, I said, Ron, come running in here with wire copy and get right in front of the camera and say, Bob Jr., something's just breaking news across the wire. And he did his job very well. Live on the air, and threw some papers at me, and I came on there. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. Barry Switzer has resigned effective immediately. Go to work for the Dallas Cowboys. And I went on and on, tried to build up this story, and Ben and Butch and George were like, oh my gosh, can't believe that. And the producer was yelling at me because I had gone long. Imagine that, a Barry being windy. And go to break, pitch to break. So I pitched to commercial break, and I never said the magic words April Fools. Well, oh, that was a long commercial break. I got called to Ron Turner's office during the commercial break, the news director. I was told to run out to the front desk and talk to her because the receptionist was fielding phone calls, and there was a column of paper that said favorable and another column that said unfavorable. I was just getting ripped to shreds for this thing, this blockbuster announcement I had laid on the people and not said April Fools. So when they came out of the break, I'm still running around meeting with all these people. They wouldn't even let me back on the air. And George Thomas goes, Bob Jr. was just kidding. It's April Fools, April Fools, oh, ha, ha. And Ben and Butch, yeah, he was kidding. It was just an April Fool's joke. Barry Switzer's still working for you. It's great, it's great, it's great. It was a miserable day in my life. United Press International called to confirm the resignation of Barry Switzer. Sports Illustrated called. Mike Treps, who was, had formerly been at Channel 4, was at OU, and called and said, Bob, what did you say? I was in the shower, and I had to apologize to him. And then they said, your dad wants to meet you out in the parking lot. And Dad came screaming up in one of those old WKY cars, the red and white paint job, and motioning to me, get out here now. And I had to get in the car, and we literally, burned rubber in that back parking lot. I mean, he was doing laps at about 45 miles an hour all the time, reaching over at me, trying to get at me, and I was shining the the passenger door pretty good. He was trying to explain to me how I'd gone too far, how there was a fine line between telling a joke and being a responsible journalist, and I had leaped over the line and all this sort of thing. So the result of that was that I had to apologize publicly on the air at 10 o'clock that night. Had to pre-record a 1-minute segment apologizing, and then I was off. Dad made out the schedule. Every April 1st for like the next 5, 6, 7 years, I was off. Huge capital letters encircled every April 1st. So it's a fun story, but I almost got fired my very first year at Channel 4 because of it. Well, as the story goes, Robbie Robertson and I worked together for 18 years. And of course, he worked with my dad forever. And so I just heard about this story, and of course I giggled because Dad was quite fond of hot dogs. In fact, would make them all the time when he'd come home after the 10 o'clock show, just by throwing a bunch of those gross little skinny pink weenies into a pan of boiling water at home late at night, and I would come running down the stairs and we'd share hot dogs and popcorn. It was a great thing. And we got pretty big because of it, literally. But I do remember this story. Robbie told, I guess they went to some football game and they were both all fired up to get some hot dogs, before the game or at halftime or whatever, because they were going to have to haul the equipment and get out of town pretty quick afterwards, or go meet their plane or get in their cars and get out of there. And sure enough, they all had their minds set on these hot dogs that they were going to have after the game. And perhaps Robbie went to fetch them or whatever and found out no hot dogs. They'd run out. And everybody was kind of bummed out because they'd been kind of thinking about it. And they got back either in the plane or the car or whatever. And my dad, when I heard this story, I laughed immediately because somebody said, your dad was wearing binocular cases around his neck. I go, binocular case? My dad didn't even know how to spell binoculars, much less wear them. And as it turns out, Robbie had the real binoculars around his neck. Dad had the case around his neck. And while everybody was kind of grumbling about no hot dogs, Dad opened up that binocular case, and the slots where the binoculars went, he pulled out 2 nice piping hot dogs that he'd had in there that he'd somehow bought before the game or at halftime or whatever, and he just ate them in front of everybody and laughed about it all the way home. So that was him, connoisseur of food, and no one had a stash food. I can't tell you how many times I opened up the cabinets at home in Norman, true story, and Snickers bars would just come flying out like somebody was in the cabinet throwing them at you. And my mom used to get so mad at him, but then she would say, I love him. I know he's stashing candy everywhere. And he had candy stashed all around our house in Norman. But I just remember how close he and Lee Allen were, and it was a very scary time in my life. Was when it would have been the summer of 1985, and so I'd only been at Channel 4 3 years, and I was on what was called the Big 8 Skyriders tour at the time, where we went around on planes and buses to every Big 8 football camp on a daily basis for 10 days, and got to go to practice and talk to all the coaches and players, and then come back and put together a 30-minute show that would air on Channel 4. And so I was in the middle of that trip in Colorado, in Boulder, and I was getting ready to go to dinner with a high school friend of mine who lived in Evergreen, Colorado at the time. Anyway, she was on her way to where I was staying in Boulder, and I get a call from my brother in Norman, who was in Oklahoma City at the time, and said, Dad has had a heart attack. And you might need to come home. And my brother is not a very good crisis manager to this day, so I was way concerned when I heard the tone in his voice. And again, he had tracked me down in Boulder, Colorado, and this is way before cell phones or anything like that. So I just remember kind of a ruffling of noise, and then Lee Allen got on the phone and said, you need to get back here right now. Don't worry, don't panic. I mean, he's in the hospital, he's okay, but you need to get back here now and be with your brother and your mom. And your plane ticket, we'll take care of your plane ticket. So my friend shows up, "Hi, how are you?" And I said, "You got to take me to Stapleton Airport immediately in Denver." And she took me to the airport. I got on a plane. I came home. And without being too maudlin, my father, when his father had a heart attack in 1966, my dad was on the radio in Norman when he got a call. "Your dad's had a heart attack," in Oklahoma City. My grandfather, Jack Berry, was in the savings and loan business, Oklahoma City Federal Savings and Loan. And as it turns out, when my dad heard that, left the radio station, drove like you know what to get to Oklahoma City real quick, and he went into the wrong entrance to whatever hospital my grandfather was at. It might have been Deaconess, Presbyterian, I can't remember. And anyway, he said, "I'm here checking on Jack Berry," and they said, "Jack Berry died 10 minutes ago," you know? And it hit my dad like a skillet in the face. And so I was thinking of that. When I'm on the airplane flying back from Boulder, I'm thinking, this is history repeated. I know exactly what's gonna happen. I'm gonna drive to Oklahoma City, I'm gonna go to the hospital, I'm gonna go in the wrong entrance, and I'm gonna say, "I'm here to check on Bob Berry," and they're gonna say, "He died 10 minutes ago." So I just remember really freaking out. And that was back in the days when you could drink and smoke on airplanes, and I did both heavily on that trip back. But I got to the hospital in time. My mother was a wreck, and she was a very composed person, but she was real concerned. As it turned out, he had had a mild attack on a golf course, and then he had complained of chest pains at home, and to their credit, they both immediately went to the doctor. They got him to the hospital in Oklahoma City, and then he had his episode or whatever while he was wired up. He defibrillated or whatever that term is, and ended up having to have quadruple bypass. So, but the thing that I'll always remember, my family always will appreciate to this day, was Lee Allen. You know, not only got me back there, calmed me down on the phone, got me back there, paid for my airline ticket, and then literally had my dad sign a new contract the night before he was to undergo quadruple bypass. And I don't even know if my dad's contract was up, but it was his way of taking care of our family in case Dad didn't make it. And I remember we had an emotional meeting there, my father, me, and my brother. My mother was out in the hall. You know, the talk that you would have. I mean, in that time, the mid-'80s, you didn't know if you were going to make it. We're getting ready to have open heart surgery. So, and he just said, if something happens to me, we're good, because Lee Allen just signed me to a new contract last night, so your mother will be taken care of. So we'll always remember that. Lee Allen's always to this day been a man I love unconditionally. He hired me, and I know he probably regrets that to this day, but I'm sure glad he did. And that allowed me to work with the greatest sportscaster in the history of this state for a quarter of a century, and I'll be eternally grateful.
Dean Blevins joins us now, and Dean, you've known BBJ for years. High school, you guys go way back, worked together in television, radio. So many Oklahomans are heartbroken by this.
It's surreal. We go back 50 years. We competed in junior high, my Central Cubs and his West Wildcats, and then we teamed together at Norman High School. Some classic memories of Bobby being a wonderful teammate, kind of a fan in basketball, and of course competing here on television for decades. Bobby's a dear friend, not a competitor. This can be a mean business, agendas and spite, but Bobby was above all that. He took his work seriously, and he always wanted to win, but he was more concerned with winning as a husband and as a father and a worker. He was fun-loving. He was never nervous. He was a fan with a microphone. Bobby is loved by thousands of people, and it is hard to comprehend that we are talking about Bobby Berry not being at the next press conference or the next game. One of a kind. I love Bobby Berry, and so do thousands.
Yeah, Dean, well said. Thank you very much, and our thoughts and prayers, of course, with his family tonight.
This morning, we are having a hard time saying goodbye to someone we've all loved. Bob Berry Jr. passed away Saturday afternoon in a crash not far from his home. He was a lighthouse, a beacon for our entire newsroom. Today, we are devastated by the loss of our friend. This morning, we are now without this member of our News Channel 4 family. He's a man whose trademark was his smile, his sense of humor. Bob Berry Jr. was killed late Saturday afternoon in an accident involving his motor scooter on North May Avenue. When Bobby told us all goodbye Friday, he had no idea, we had no idea, it would be forever.
Now, Friday Sports Overtime with Bob Berry Jr.
That's right. It is the FSO show for this Friday, the 19th of June. And on this day back in 1971, singer-songwriter Carole King had her first #1 hit, I Feel the Earth Move Under My Feet. I feel the sky tumbling down. Okay, enough.
Bobby brought a unique energy to sports, and he came by it naturally.
I'm the luckiest man alive, and that's not just some statement. That's the truth. I'm doing exactly what I want to do.
Most kids grow up listening to lullabies. Bobby went to sleep hearing this.
And it'll be the Sooners ball at about the 1.
His career path was in his DNA.
With a 30-22 win in the Cactus Bowl, and they unleashed the newest weapon, James Castleman, wide receiver, having shocked the Cowboys to win the Bedlam battle here in Stillwater.
Credentials from every event he worked form a mountain of sports history. He loved what he did. He loved his family more. He always referred to his wife as the lovely Gina.
We were friends for a really long time. And then just one day, I don't know, he kissed me.
Bobby and Gina made a rare on-camera appearance together on the Thunder Kiss Cam.
And you get to talk to Kevin Durant more than probably in the past.
He was a professional. His desk dotted by the hardware to prove it.
And the Oklahoma State Cowboys were almost 20-point underdogs to the defending national champions.
But what we'll remember is how much he made us laugh.
You know what they didn't do?
What?
They didn't guard, Linda.
Oh,
they didn't
yeah.
guard. You got to play defense. You got to get on them. They've got to play defense tonight. Oh.
And if they do that, they might win.
If they do that, they got a real good chance. The coaches and the players that were exhausted after that game that ended early this morning. What about the sellout crowd? Even the media people. I mean, I'm just laying here saying, why not just stay at the arena, man? Well, I wonder if I can see Jimmy Johnson or Matt Kenseth or somebody. We're here at the Texas Motor Speedway. I mean, you know, Oklahoma and Baylor are going to run the football tonight. They were running in the Texas 500 right here last weekend. They won the national championship last year. We're in the parking lot at Dallas Cowboys Stadium. We got the trucks. We got the porta potties. We got our grill over there. We're going to have brats and burgers and everything else. And this team right here is going to arrive at their team hotel tonight at 8:30. And the Cowboys are coming to play at the Cowboys Stadium.
When we pass his desk in the hours and days to come, the desk he shared with his dad, we'll be shocked that it's empty, even as it echoes the voice we'll miss so much.
It's Bob Berry Jr., Oklahoma's News Channel 4 Sports.
Sports luminaries from around the state are weighing in with their respect for our friend. From coaches, fellow sports journalists, and those in high office, many are remembering his talent, his laugh, his joy of life.
One of Bobby's contemporaries and competitor was former sportscaster, now Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett, who, like the rest of us, was absolutely stunned at the news today, but through his sadness fondly remembers our friend.
You know, in the 30 years I've known him, he was such a nice guy. And I'll tell you, the guy knew his stuff and did his homework. I would listen to him on the radio sometimes and just be amazed at the depth of information he had off the top of his head. And I guess another thing I appreciated about him was he was a fan. You knew who his favorite teams were. You knew who his favorite people were. He didn't hide that. And I think that came across as very refreshing to the viewers and the listeners.
Speaking of his successful radio career, his on-air partner in the morning on the Sports Animal, former OSU football coach Pat Jones.
And the thing about him that he was a professional. He was a legitimate journalist. He wasn't just some slappy put on a tie and stood in front of a camera and acted like he knew what he was talking about. I mean, Bob Jr. knew people. People knew Bob. People confided in Bob. He knew things that some other people didn't know, or things were passed on to him before some others, and those sorts of things. And obviously had the great pedigree, you know, working with his dad and coming up and all the things associated with it. So we have lost one of the, aside from really a good guy, one of the real truly outstanding sports journalists in this state.
Bobby's friendship and talent reached to Tulsa, where his friend KJRH sportscaster Al Jerkins was this evening reminiscing about Junior.
Well, the thing I loved about Bob is that, and I'm sure he got a lot of this from his dad, is that he loved sports so much. He wasn't the kind of guy that went on television to get his mug on TV. He did it because he loved to report the sports. He loved to inform people.
Celebrated sports writer Barry Trammell rubbed shoulders with Bob Berry Jr. at every big Oklahoma sporting event.
He was great on television, but he was even better live. I loved it when he hosted one of the events we have in town, like the Thorpe Banquet or the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame inductions, because he knew his stuff. He knew Oklahoma sports, but he also knew Oklahomans, and he liked people, and people were comfortable around him, and he just did a fantastic job. And Channel, it's not going to be the same at Channel 4, I know, but it's also not going to be the same for any of us involved in Oklahoma sports.
And OU Athletic Director Joe Castiglione was friend and fan of both Bob Berry Sr. and his talented son.
When Bob Berry Sr. was honored by the National Football Foundation, and Bob Berry Jr. was there to accept it on his father's behalf. It's amazing, on a weekend where we're celebrating Father's Day, to think about those two and how they were linked to so many things that happen in our grand state of Oklahoma.
Oklahoma State head coach Mike Gundy had a relationship with Bobby and his dad for more than 30 years. He called us moments after he heard the news while he was at his son's baseball game.
I'm shocked and heartbroken. Our family's in Tulsa. We're playing baseball, and I just couldn't believe it. Bob Berry Jr. and all the way back to Senior have been so special to our family and Oklahoma State University. It's been 30 years, and he's just been so professional and handled everything in a positive manner, but was always so fair. And it's just hard for us to believe. We're just in shock.
Bobby was a friend to all. He loved what he did, and coaches knew that, including OU head coach Bob Stoops. The coach sent us this statement Saturday saying he was one of the most respected and recognized sportscasters in our state, a beloved friend to many. Our work will never be the same without him. No one was more excited about the Thunder coming to Oklahoma City than Bobby. He was one of the team's biggest fans, and the team loved and respected him. Chairman Clay Bennett issued this statement praising Bobby, saying, "For decades, Bob covered sports with integrity, dedication, and passion. Oklahoma sports broadcasting has lost one of its finest." You didn't even have to know Bobby personally to know he was full of love, always had a great smile. Channel 4 viewers Bill and Levon Stockdale saw evidence of Bobby's love 4 years ago and were kind enough to share this story with us. It's Father's Day 2011. They sat across from the best father and son team in the sports family. Senior was treated to a Father's Day morning meal at Cracker Barrel in Norman by his son. You couldn't see a happier family in the whole place. You could see the pride and the appreciation that they shared. Tomorrow and forevermore, though those broadcasting legends are together again. It wasn't just the Stockdales that noticed that special relationship between Bobby and his dad. This image was posted by our friends at the Oklahoma Weather Updates yesterday evening. There you see Bob Sr. with Bobby looking on. They write, "On this Father's Day weekend, if this isn't proof that life is precious, I don't know what is." Bob Berry Jr. reunited with Senior just in time for Father's Day.